Hey kids, we're back with another dice taste test.
Let's talk about the D20 dice math and replacing the D20.
Hey, throb-goblin, why are you so concerned about modding D&D instead of playing a different game?
Well, Mr. Strawman, it's because all of you are, too. Here's the percentage of people playing D&D. I'd like to play a different game for different purposes, too, but instead we have people like this.
It's me, the Marvel guy. I'm back with more 5e superhero builds.
Shut up! Go play Marvel Phase Rip. Digressions aside, because my D20 is currently working its way through my digestive tract, let's find options for replacements using what we've got left over. Besides, the D20 kinda sucks anyway as a resolution mechanic. It's swingy and inconsistent and annoys the Christ out of me.
A history lesson!
We'll start by looking back through history because replacing the D20 isn't a newfangled concept. Chainmail, which D&D was initially an expansion to, used D6 for resolution. It only offered the D20 as an optional rule that later became standard because selling polyhedral dice was one of the ways TSR could still make a profit. You can photocopy a pamphlet of rules, but you can't photocopy dice. Probably. Unfortunately, the D20 that TSR sold were soft plastic, and over time it would round off into a small orb and lose its function. Granted, so did the rest of the dice set, but the D20 was the worst because it was the quickest to round down, and also the dice that's most used. This further necessitated the need to replace the D20. People replaced it with a Zachi D30 in a conversion chart, but they also replaced it with 3D6. Following 1980 and the invention of the D10, they also used 2D10. Prior to then, the D20 actually had 1 to 10 twice for a D10. This piece of plastic is twice my goddamn age. It turns 42 this year. Anyway, what players were concerned about then was replacing the D20 with whatever dice they had that roughly added up to 20. This worked fine, but it caused a lot of weird issues. Suddenly, there's an average and a mode when you roll the dice. Time to talk about dice math. Alright, the D20 is 1 die. It has no probability curve at all. In theory, you are equally likely to roll any of these numbers, unless you stuck your dice in the oven to weight them. John, you cheating However, you'll find that the center and the mean of this die is 10.5. You can figure that out by adding up each individual possible result and then dividing by the number of faces on the die, or you can cheat and add 1 to the die type before dividing by 2. You'll note that the center of the die is important, because that's the vertex on the probability distributions we'll be drawing later. Next, we have 2 dice. We'll use the prior example of 2d10 because it's relevant. The mean of each die is 5.5. Added together, these dice have an average roll of 11. Yeah, we understand that already. But the interesting part is what happens to the probability of the roll. You get a pyramid distribution. The most average number you will roll is 11, and then there's a steady linear progression in either direction downward. The increment in change in either direction for 2d10 is always 1%, but that's because 2d10 is an easy die type to make a pyramid distribution with. And now we're moving on to 3 dice. 3d6 gives you an average of 10.5, just like a d20. But let's watch what it does to the probability. It makes one big-ass bell curve. You're extremely likely to perform at an average instead of anything outside of it. The very extremities went from 5% on a d20 to 1% on 2d10 to less than 0.5% with 3d6. These are the 3 basic probability distributions typically considered when making RPGs. There is a 4th basic distribution. It's called the 0 distribution. This is when you roll no dice. There are other less basic probability distributions like dice pools, incrementing dice values, and throwing a pog slammer at a chart, but we're not concerned about those right now. We're concerned about which one of these 4 basic probability distributions are best for playing D&D with.
So which is it?
The 0 distribution. This one is best for pretentious games named Nobilis. The single die distribution. This one is good for nothing. I hate you. Die. This distribution provides extreme swinginess with an equal probability distribution across all numbers. I don't like it, if only because it means a full 10% of all rolls will be stupid thanks to crit fails and successes.
In 5e, you do not have crit fails on skill checks.
Nonsense. Like it or not, 90% of D&D culture is based around glorifying crit fails and successes.
Nat 20, let me summon it inside of the guy's lungs.
The other 10% is based on trying to fuck a dragon. If D&D 5th edition is now designed around mouthfeel and how players remember old school D&D, Wizards of the Coast might as well lean full tilt. The 2 dice distribution. This one is probably one of my favorites. It gives a strong bias towards the center, but still lets the game have some swinginess. The swinginess is probably important in a game like D&D, where without it, hard things become damn near impossible. Regardless, this distribution lets your character perform at an average without giving them an overwhelming chance of critical failures and successes like the D20. It also makes your average roll slightly higher. This does help alleviate the issue of some hard tasks now being so outside distribution that they've become functionally impossible, something that the bell curve struggles with. The 3d6 bell curve. This distribution is known as the stay in your fucking lane. If the DC for an expert task is considered to be 25-30, you sure as shit had better not attempt it unless you're both an expert in that area and a high level, or you will fail. The reason for this is multifaceted. The average is a little lower, like the D20, but the top end has been filed off. Even if the top end was still there, you wouldn't be likely to roll that number thanks to how the bell curve works. Your odds of rolling anything above a 14 is less than 10% on 3d6. Personally, I love 3d6 as a resolution mechanic, especially in GURPS, but I do think it's a little too aggressively homogenizing for a game like D&D, which expects radical swings in the dice and isn't based in reality. In conclusion, use 2d10. It gives you an average of functionality while still allowing for the swinginess D&D expects. Or just use the D20. I'm not your dad. Shit, use 5d4 if you're really a psychopath. You're still gonna be having fun. And frankly, that's what matters. That and fucking the dragon.
What is the state of our union?